Hello everyone, this is Nusrat Sharmi from group number 9 and I'm going to present today the evolution of the Canadian mining industry, the role of regulatory punctuation. And the research paper was prepared by Bonita I. Russell, Daniel Sapiro and Aidan R. Vinny. In the introduction, we will look into the exact research area which the authors were interested in. In this study, they analyzed the evolution of Canada's mining industry from 1929 to 2006, focusing on the determinants of the number of firms in the industry and why this number has changed over that period. And also how Canadian specific regulatory punctuations, particularly the introduction of specific new taxes, environmental registration, and incentives have shaped the trajectory of mining firm participation. So the author chose to study specifically the Canadian mining industry for a good reason. The Canadian mining sector is one of the largest and most important in the world. As of 2006, there were more mining companies listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange, as you call it TSX, and the TSX Venture Stock Exchange than on the Australian, UK, USA, and the South African exchanges combined. This was reported in one of the scholarly articles named Clark in 2007. They estimated that approximately 31.7 million equity raises on stock exchanges in 2006 by exploration and mining companies. And out of that, 38.2 was raised in Canada itself. By comparison, 35.7 was total raised in UK and 8.7 was raised in Australia. So we understand that how big the footprint of Canadian mining industry is here. And finally, over 20% of the worldwide mining exploration spending takes place in Canada. Two of the most important global mining centers are located in Canada also. The Vancouver is the center of exploration, capital acquisition, and mining expertise, especially as this relates to South American and Asian mining. And Toronto is the center of mining, finance, and venture capital and headquarters of the majority of large Canadian firms. But unfortunately, there were no such study that examines the evolution of mining industry in Canada. Most of the empirical studies of the industrial evolution have focused on the manufacturing industries that share the similar structural characteristics. Because of this, probably, extent models of industrial revolution tend to ignore industry-specific and national-specific factors that can cause actually the different track on that is heterogeneous industrial revolution. And we obviously, for that reason, lack adequate empirical understanding on the evolutionary process at the single industry level from the early stage to the late stage of its life cycle. So if we look back to the history of Canadian mining industry, according to Wikipedia, it started in 16th century. In the 1570s, there was a brief attempt in mining operation, but it was not successful. So the first truly industrial mining operation in Canada was an iron mine. It was Tourist Rivers in Quebec, which remained a going concern from 1738 to 1883. In 1848, copper mining in Bruce, Ontario has become the first industrial scale mining of its substances other than iron. And later, the Canadian mining industry continued to expand nationwide through 19th century, and by 20th century, it became world's largest one. Now, Canada has become one of the largest producer of many substances like platinum, gold, nickel, and many more. Next part of my presentation comes with a very relevant question. Is mining different than other industry? It's probably not that difficult to make that assumption that it's likely to be different. By definition, in mining industry, the raw materials is still in its natural habitat and has to be extracted from the mine. But in manufacturing industry, the raw materials are stored in modern warehouse, planned out, and operated to run efficiently and effectively. So most mines exhibit that site specificity, and as a result, mining firms are most likely to be under specific national regulatory governance. That could actually change the industry's revolutionary track. Actually, the initial review of the data suggests that the evolutionary pattern of the Canadian mining industry is not like typical manufacturing industries in at least one important aspect. In normal industry revolution, the positive skew is very common. So what does this positive skew mean? It means that in the beginning there are a few firms, and then the number of firms increases rapidly over a relatively short period of time, and then the major shakeout happens due to competition and other reasons. And after that, for an extended period of years, the remaining firm becomes stable in numbers, and with maturity, it experiences a gradual decline in numbers. And this pattern is very common in many industries like newspaper, automobiles, tire, brewing, telephone, and semiconductor, etc. The positive skew we discussed in the previous slide is very prominent in this US tire industry trend. In this figure, it summarizes the evolutionary pattern of the US tire industry, and this is very typical for a manufacturing industry. This figure shows how in the first few years the number of tire firms increases and reached in its peak in just 16 years. And right after that, the major shakeout happened, and which resulted rapid decrease in the number of firms until the next decades. And with the maturity of the firm, we have also seen the gradual declination of numbers in the rest of the year. Now we will see the evolutionary path of Canadian mining industry. The figure B shows the path of Canadian mining industry over a similar time period. It's around 80 years. But the two figures appears to be quite different. The Canadian mining profile over the 1929 to 2006 period is quite unusual. There are initially few firms, then the firms increase slowly, but not rapidly over a very extended period of time before the firms' numbers begin to decline. A peak number is reached late in the evolution of the population. Here in the year of 1988. So the most obvious question later arises from this data is why is the checkout so late and what are the causes? So the research suggests that the unique features of the mining industry makes the traditional explanation of the industrial revolution less relevant. The authors also argue that there are some other factors like industry and country specific policies measures that can be more relevant in explaining industry regulation of Canadian mining industry. So authors focus on in particularly on the possible effect of regulatory punctuation where the change of public policy can affect the course of industry regulation. So in typical industrial evolution, there are two dominant theoretical approaches. So the first one is the density independence model, and the second one is variant of the industrial organization economics model. The first one, the density dependency model, is derived from organizational ecology theory, and many scholars in many times actually summarized and also supported the theory. For example, Barnett in 1997, he summarizes the theory as when there are few organizations in a population, increases in the density of such organization enhances the legitimacy to the organizational form, leading to a higher founding rate and lower death rate. On the contrary, at more high level of density, however, competitive interactions become more likely as organizations crowd their needs, reducing the founding rate and increasing the death rate. In this way, he describes how the growth of farms increases the competition and affects the density. So in a different period also, the Carroll and Sominath in 1997 found evidence consistent of consistent with density dependency using US brewed industry data from 1633 to 1988. In 1989, Carol and Hannah studied nine newspapers population between 1800 to 1975 and found both founding dates and mortality rates were a function of population density. So in this way, there are many other scholars in different times who talked about the dependency model and also density dependency model. But there are one problematic assumption. That is, all organizations experience the same effects of diversity and competition. But in early stage, low density condition is reasonable because both incumbents and entrances typically have similar organizational form. But in more mature organization, there are large dominant firms, and normally there is a few small firms, right? So several researchers also mentioned that this theory, the density dependency theory, is neither explains the shakeout nor consider the long-term and slow declination of number of firms. Now we will talk about the second theoretical approach to industrialization, the industrialization economic model, and we can call it IOE model. The simplest IOE model of industrial evolution is that high profitability will attract interest and the interest bid away these profits. Eventually, this will push into a long-term equilibrium point where there is no excess profit and some number of firms will be there. So, and whenever the profits are in below the normal levels, exit will naturally will occur, and the profitability for the survivors will back to the equilibrium. Almost all the version of IOE approach achieve this equilibrium changes process by some sort of industry consolidation or shakeout process. But the main point is the drivers of consolidation. What may is the cause of this consolidation? So innovation capacity is one of them, which is a focus point for the researchers when we talk about the shakeouts. So research in the evolutionary economics tradition focuses on variability or differences in innovation capacity in different stages of industrial evolution, and it starts with the entrepreneurial or product innovation phase, which followed by a routine or process innovation. Uh, the different researchers has studied these phases, and they found out that new farm survival rates are positively related to their innovation capacity. And farm numbers were influenced by major changes in technology related to their innovation capacity. So it means that innovation fosters entry, and the failure to innovation prompt exit. And so we can understand how innovation played an important role in interest and survival of any farm. There are other aspects as well. A different stream of the IOU industrial focuses broadly on the centrality of changes in economics of scale and scope over time, especially when it induced by the emergence of a dominant design. So during the period of technological changes, few firms enters and compete for dominance with their unique different unique design unique product and process technologies. So, however, the establishment of a change, the establishment of a successful dominant designs is assisted by a period of incremental change. So, barrier to entry arises because of the increased importance of economics of scale and scope. And there are a number of empirical studies that are consist with the dominant design theory. And according to them, the farm survival was strongly influenced by the technological changes, and the probability of farm survival was greater for farms entering the industry before the emergence of a dominant design than those of the farms who are entering after the emergence. So it's about the time also how they when they are entering in the industry. But this all this theory can is very relevant for the product focused industries, not for the plant or farm based industry. So it's not that relevant for Canadian mining industry. It is argued that the emergence of a dominant design is just a special case for the emergence of the importance of economic of scale and scope. And this actually goes with the evolution of Canadian mining industry more appropriately. Though the emergence of a dominant design is not that relevant both for plant and the farm level economics of scale and scope, but it is important in determining the evolution of industry style. So it has an important aspect of in different angle. The hybrid model for mining industry comes in a picture when the scholars theorize that it is unlikely that one of the overarching theory can adequately explain evolution across industries and countries. They suggest that industry-specific technological theories are likely to be an important factor leading to heterogeneity in evolutionary path. Along with this line, others argue that industry intrinsically vary in the importance of economics of scale and scope. And there is second important source of heterogeneity that can affect industry regulation, which is national institutional environments. And researchers suggest that specific socio-political factors likely to be important here. Others argue that industry-specific regulation is likely to be an important source of heterogeneity because economics regulation tend to be industry specific, focusing on the market structure and firm conduct within the market. It regulates the phenomena like entry, exit, merger, and arrest. So that regulatory changes can specifically conceptualize in the terms of evolutionary punctuated equilibrium. As Hefman in 2001 put it in a way that organizational change can be happen by sudden and dramatic continuous or in the environment such as a larger scale shift in the government regulation, which can summarize by as regulatory punctuation. And there are studies on this regulatory punctuation, and studies consistently finds that cost increasing regulation can negatively capitalize into the share markets. Even few studies directly studies the impact of cost increasing regulation on the exits, especially the farm, either on the farms or the plant levels. And they find that cost regulation, especially the environmental regulations, raises exit rates and slow down the entry rates. And this exit is especially higher among the smaller firms, which has a definitely significant impact on the total population of firms in the industry. And the different level and types of taxes are another source of industry national specific regulatory heterogeneity. Tax increases negatively affect share prices, and this source of regulatory evolutionary heterogeneity is more relevant to the industries which generate resource range, and especially like plants which are site specific, and mines are very site specific industry, right? So the evidence of, for example, suggests that the significant increase in regulatory cost can negatively affect expectations regarding the profitability. Furthermore, with other resources, we see that industry-specific technology and national institutional factors are likely to be very relevant to industries like mining because at several stages of the supply chain, there is a degree of site specificity. And site specificity tends to be strongly influenced by protection technology. But it is also noteworthy, and we have to keep in mind that though this mining industry has experienced significant technological changes, but it didn't experience the technological changes enough that can ignite the shakeout of its own right. So let's talk about the empirical framework, which is important to examine the impact of regulatory punctuation in the evolution of mining industry in Canada. So the author required a base model to which they added the relevant explanatory variables. Previously, we discussed about the two distinct theoretical orientation that they have used as the basis for estimation. And they adapted empirical methodology initially developed by Jaworski and Mazzucato that to some extent operationalize each theoretical orientation explanation. So they finally selected two non-tested alternatives as the basis for developing their models. And then they augment the base model to incorporate the number of Canadian-specific sources of heterogeneity and notably significant changes to the regulatory regime. As we discussed earlier, the density dependency model focuses on the sequential process of legitimation and competition. In the early stages of the evolution of an industry, the legitimacy of the organizational form is the key dynamic. As the market became more established, the competition replaces legitimation as the key dynamic. So, as we see, there are no direct measures of legitimacy and competition. Jaworski and Mazzucato provides a simple density dependency model that can relate the changes in the number of farms over time to farm density in the previous period. So they have developed three equations which will act as a hypothesis. So in the first equation, the base model assumes that the profits in excess of fixed costs attracts entrances, and any erosion of this profit encourages exit. Over time, the industry reaches equilibrium where there are no excess profits and the number of firms in the industry is stable. So in the first equation, we see n is the number of firms at the time of t, and the delta nt is the first difference in farm numbers, and p1 in multiplied by p minus 1 is the founding rate times the square of the time of farms in the year t minus 1. And this founding rate approximates legitimacy, the exit rate competition, and the p0 here is a constant, and the epsilon is the error term. So the equation is expressed in first differences because it's not plausible to assume that all of the observed data are equilibrium observations. So they label this model as a negative feedback model. In the next equation, there are expectations based. They assume that the rational expectation with respect to expected profit and sunk cost explain that evolutionary trajectory of an industry. Though a more behaviorally oriented version of IOE posits that the system is derived as much by information cascades and bandwagon effects as by the rational expectation. So it's a more towards the rational expectation side. So Zerowski and Mazzucato refers to this as a contagious model because agents' actions are at least partially based on the actions of other agents rather than purely on their own analysis of industry fundamentals. So in this model, the equation delta nt is the first difference in the number of farms, and the epsilon is the error term. The constant alpha 0 is the degree to which the long run profits exceed fixed costs and is expected to be positive. And the feedback term delta 1 reflects the expectation regarding future profits. In the third equation, this is very attractive because this will be combined of rational behavior with the effects of information cascades, which might be the important for mining sector. In this equation, they have augmented the equation 2 by adding the term PC. And then in this later term, term captures contagion by modeling current entry as a function of past entry decision. For example, if firms in fact are influenced by the action of other firms, then the unexpected increase in the entry or exits would be magnified over time as the firm responded by altering their behavior. So evidently, this pi 2 equals 0, the model reduces to the negative feedback model. So here, they therefore work mainly on the equation 1 and 3, as these two are the non-nested alternative. So they have applied the J test in order to choose between them. And none of the equations actually account for the kind of changes in the national specific institution and regulatory environment over time that were discussed earlier. Thus, they augment the chosen equation with variable designed to capture the effects of regulatory punctuation. And these variables will be discussed and described in the later section of our presentation. In this study, for the purpose of this data collection, the authors have adopted a broad definition of Canadian mining industry, which includes the exploration, identification of, and extraction of solid materials and metals. They have used this because the mining industry of Canada is widely dispersed among the minerals and metals supply chain. So they have used two handbooks. One is Canadian Mining Handbook, which is published until 2004, and another other is the Canadian and American Miners Handbook after 2004. They have used this handbook, which have published annually since 1934, and provides a continuous listing of active Canadian mining companies. And for this study specifically, they have chosen the number of firms with whose stocks were included in the trading range section of the handbooks for the year 1929 to 2006 in their study period. The used data was quite sufficient to estimate the equation 1 and 3, which was chosen by the authors. But to be more specific to mining industry, they had to extend the base of the model with few more variables. And this variable attempt to capture the impact of two types of regulatory punctuation. The first type of punctuation consists of the introduction of significant environmental regulation. And for that, they have used CEPA, the Canadian Environmental Protection Act, as the variable, which was introduced in 1988. And the second type of punctuation was a series of changes to the mining tax regime. So in 1972, there was the Income Tax Act, which acted as a variable in their model. Later, the mining exploration and depletion allowance, which was introduced in 1983, has an impact on the mining industry. So they have also used this as a variables and accounted for a negative tax rate. Apart from these three, there are two more additional variables which was reasonably added. The first one is the US price of gold, and other one is the Bank of Canada rate. The gold rate was added in the variables because it is related to the commodity rate, and this commodity rate is mining industry is very sensitive to commodity rates. And the second is gold is itself is a choice of metal for most producing and non-producing mining firms. And for Canadian bank rate, it was act as a capital availability. So for the mining firms need to raise significant amounts of capital to finance the exploration and development of new firms. So the price and availability of capital was also important in the industry. So the bank rate of Canada is a significant impact on the number of firms in the industry. The result of this research paper has reported in net table number 1, as we can see it, and all the estimates are obtained using standard least square regression analysis. In the first two columns, the traditional models were explained, and as you can see, the density variable density dependency model, only 4% of the variability in firms' numbers are explained. Though, according to F-test statistic, the whole equation is statistically significant, but it fails to account for the shakeout of firms. Same as the contagion model. It has statistically significance, but it only explains 9% of the variability in farm numbers. As we already mentioned, we have more authors have to decide between the two models as a maze model, between the density and dependency model and the contagion model. He has conducted J test for this non-tested alternatives, but it turns out that none of the models is preferable. So they have to use hybrid models as the base model, and that turned out that it increases the explanatory power of the equation considerably. So it is obviously obvious that neither the density dependency model nor the contagion model alone adequately explains the evolution of the Canadian mining industry. So later on, he has added the variables with the models. So in hybrid model 1, he has measured the tax changes using the FTC. And in hybrid number 2, he has added the policy changes as measure as dummy variables. So here they found out that the effect of the FTC and CEPA regulatory punctuations are negative and statistically significant, while the effect of MEDA is positive and statistically significant. So at the same time, the commodity price have a positive effect of net entry, while the CBR or Canadian bank rate has like a statistically significant impact. So the augmented hybrid model 2 provides a substantial improvement in explanatory power related to hybrid model number 1. And finally, in hybrid model number 3, they have measured the policy effect as the number of years the policy has been in place. So in the hybrid number 3 results confirm that tax and environmental regulatory punctuation negatively impact net entry rates, but also show that the measured effects are not necessarily permanent. The fact that the effect of this regulatory punctuation diminishes over time could be explained by either by the firms adjusting to these changes over time or by the increase in unmeasured changes in the environment as the time passes. On the other hand, the positive effects of MEDA appears to persist strongly over time. This could be because subsidies are always valuable at the margin and requires no adjustment by the firms. On the contrary, environmental costs can become strong as firms adjust their capital stocks. So the result indicates that while the explanatory power of the equation is improved, the basic conclusions regarding the impact of the regulatory variables remain unchanged. The Canada's mining sector is a crucial part for Canadian mining, and the global demand for mining minerals is only adding to its potential. According to S&P Global Market Intelligence, more non-ferrous mineral exploration dollar comes to Canada than any other country. In 2017, roughly 1.1 billion, or about 14% of the global exploration spending, was allocated to Canada, which edged out Australia for the top spot globally. According to a study commissioned by the Ontario Mining Association, the economic impact of the new gold mine in Ontario itself can create 4,000 jobs during the construction and production, and also can contribute 38 to 43 million to the economy once it starts operating. So obviously, for that reason, Canada has established a network of economic thinkers, business association, financial capital, and government programs that can support and promote new technologies that can help set a standard for the mining worldwide. The government of Canada also is supporting the continued success of the sector by investing in innovation solutions that will strengthen Canada's international leadership in sustainable, efficient, and safe mining. According to funding portal, the data shows that over 230 million dollar was awarded to 20 operations and program mining projects between January to May in 2021. In the same sorry, in the same year, the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Industry announces an investment of 40 million in a project of the Center of Excellence in Mining and Innovation Inc. There are so many innovation going on in mining industry right now. Like Chemnet mining is currently researching the implementation of hydrogen power to replace the use of diesel fuel in operating underground mines. Once the technology will adapted, this could reduce the GHG's emission footprint of the underground mines by 25%. So this will obviously improve the health of workers in mining by reducing their exposure to diesel exhaust. New technologies is now turning the um, waste of the minerals and into a potential source of minerals. In the past 3 decades, 6 billion tons of mine tailing has accumulated with a potential value of $10 billion. Reprocessing this waste can produce significant recoveries of a rare earth element like gold, nickel, and other valuable elements. Artificial intelligence and new remote control technology can also be deployed to operate mining equipment and find new discoveries. As we discussed in some research in the traditional hybrid model, now we can expect to see positive effects of these technological changes and regulatory supports toward the mining industry in recent years.